Moita, who runs the Intern Neuroscience Lab at the campus.
Good evening, you can all hear me? Okay, so I run the neurobiology, behavioral neurobiology group, and we study a number of things, one of which is how we form memories, and that's what I'm going to be telling you about today. So, I need something. So I'm going to be telling you about whether memories are faithful representations of our experiences or whether they are constructs of our minds. To do that, I'm going to use a few examples and illustrations that I hope will help you understand how we're thinking about this subject. So I will start with one. I'm going to read the text, and I'm going to ask you to try to remember what I'm going to be telling you. So I'm going to start. A snapshot-sized photo made with the aid of a computer program that merged the photograph of a small clay sculpture of a body-shaped canyon with a photograph of a landscape. So I believe that many of you don't remember in detail what I just said, but maybe what I'm going to do now will help you. Okay, so this is the picture that I just described, which is the artwork of Tom Friedman, and I'm going to now read the text to you again. Okay. A snapshot-sized photo made with the aid of a computer program that merged the photograph of a small clay sculpture of a body-shaped canyon with a photograph of a landscape. Now, I believe that many of you now remember better what I just read, and that means that what you're doing is using a framework, knowledge that you just acquired, to now encode this new memory. And so, this is something that we've been studying in neuroscience, so basically how past knowledge is used to encode new memories. And one way, I'm going to give you an example that is about animals, because I think it's important. And so this is an example of work done with rats. And basically, the idea is to test again, how can prior knowledge help encoding new memories? And here, what you have is an arena. And you can see here, these spots here are food wells. So rats can find food there. But importantly, each food well is associated with a particular flavor. So now the task of the animal is he's putting a start box. It's one of each of these 4 locations. And now the rat is given one of the flavored foods. And based on that, he has to go to the spot where that flavor was. So he cannot find food reward in any other place within that maze. So rats can learn that. They can learn the association between a particular flavor and a particular location. But it takes them a long time. So it will take them many days and many sessions of training and multiple trials, so they can now learn to go to the right place. Once they've learned this, though, if you now give them a new flavor and a new location that is near one of the pre-existing ones, then the animals can learn this with a single trial. So that means that rats also can use their prior knowledge to encode new memories. And basically what they were doing by doing this prior training is providing a framework, just like I did by presenting you the picture of the artwork that illustrates the text that I was reading. So this is how we're now studying this, and now I'm going to move on to a second example, which I hope is going to help make the next point that I'm going to try to convey to you. So what I'm going to be doing is to read a list of words, and I'm going to ask you to remember all the words that I said. And please make an effort to remember all of them. So here I go. Farm, chicken, horse, barn, eggs, apple, pig, horn, house, trees, land, milk. Okay, so now I'm going to resort back to the high-tech version of the tasks, which is to raise your hand. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you believe that the word that I'm going to be saying now was part of the list that I just gave you. Okay, so did I say apple? Okay. Did I say boat? Did I say cow? Okay. Great. So I said the word cow are just illustrating the fact that we build false memories. I did not say the word cow, although you remember the fact that I said the word cow. And the reason why we believe that happens is precisely through the same phenomenon that I was just explaining to you before, which is you probably have a concept of farm in your minds that involves a number of things. So if I say the word farm, it's going to come associated with a bunch of other words, okay? And so these are part of what, it's your mental conception of farm. It's what we call a mental schema. So that's why when I said a number of words that pertain to your mental schema, now it would be natural that I used the word cow, although I did not. So maybe you were not so sure, it's hard to remember all of the words, so you'll use your prior knowledge about what's likely for me to say, and then you'll think that I said it, you form that memory, you actually think you remember me saying that. Now, false memories are something that are very common in our lives, and we create them all the time, and I think the most striking ones are the ones from your childhood. So many of you are likely to remember things that are very early in your lives, and that your brain was not mature enough to encode and to form those memories. So it's impossible for you to remember that. But you remember them vividly. So this is an example. Maybe this is a kid with a chic costume, and maybe as an adult, this person would think that it remembers quite clearly wearing this costume, and how cute he was, and whatever. And this is very likely to be a memory that was formed as he was wearing this costume. But it's more likely to be because people told him, the family members told him about how cute he was with his costume. There's probably pictures of it. And so you create your memory. Now you actually think that you remember going through that experience. Okay, so how do we think this is taking place in the brain? How are memories formed and how that can contribute to the creation of false memories and the incorporation of past knowledge? So we believe that memories are formed through several stages. So one is the encoding phase. And I'll just use the example of the list of words that I was reading to you. So while I was reading the words, you were registering them in your brain. So that's the encoding phase. So now imagine maybe that I would only ask you, now I didn't say anything else, and you have time, and you'll just think about these words. And through this process, you'll actually consolidate the memory of the list of the words that I said. Consolidation means that a memory that was just formed is unstable, and therefore you can lose it. But through several mechanisms, it can become actually stable. So you basically consolidate the memory. And then you can actually also retrieve the memory. So when I was asking you to raise your hand, you had to recall which words I had said, and that's a retrieval process. So how do we think this is going on in the brain? When you're encoding, there's parts of the brain that are registering what's going on, and one of those is the hippocampus. It's this part here of the brain, and it's very important for the encoding, for example, of episodic memories, which is last night I went for dinner with my friends. And so what's going on is that you have activity in some hippocampal cells, and that's going to lead to changes in the connections between these neurons. So these are the synapses. So in the same mechanism that Megan just told you a few minutes ago. So basically activity in the hippocampus as you're registering information is going to change the connections in a lasting way. And that's what we think is the memory in your brain. Now the hippocampus is not alone in the brain. There's quite a lot of other structures like this big cortex that everybody has mentioned already. And the cortex, we believe, is talking with the hippocampus. And in the cortex, there's where we have our mental schemes, our prior knowledge of the world. And because this is talking with the hippocampus, it's going to influence what you're actually going to be encoding. Okay, so this is one way by which maybe mental schemas can actually help contribute to the formation of memories, but also the creation of false memories. And then there's the process of consolidation. These changes here in the synapses have to be stabilized, have to be crystallized in some way, so that now they are not changeable anymore. They're fixed. And this also happens with the help a crosstalk between the hippocampus and the cortex. So these structures talk to each other as you replay the information that you just encoded. And that's also going to help your memories stabilize. They stabilize in a more distributed network within your brain. So the idea used to be that you acquire your memory, and as that memory is very young, it is unstable, so it can be changed, prone to interference or loss. But then through these processes of consolidation, stabilization, they would become sort of crystallized and they could never be changed again. So the idea would be then that false memories would be constructs, new constructs on top of this one, so like a layered structure, each layer being a new memory. But now we know that's not the only way through which false memories can happen on top of original memories. Actually, every time you retrieve a memory, so when you recall a particular memory, like the list of words that I told you, even if it's consolidated, the fact that you activate you recall, you're going to activate neurons in the hippocampus, and that's going to actually make these synapses unstable, okay? So just the fact that you remember something, it's going to make that representation unstable. And that means that you have to consolidate it once again in order for you not to lose it. And that means that every time you remember something, it's a time where you can change and alter memory. And therefore, you can change them. And because it's actually altering the original memory representation, it means that you can alter it forever. So the original memory is gone. Now you have a new one. So the take-home message is that memories are highly dynamic constructs of our brains, and that they reflect our experiences but are not faithful representations of the past. That's it.
So we're giving all of you one last chance to vote on a question about the brain, and this is probably one of the most widespread myths related to the brain, and I'm sure all of you have seen this many times before, so let's see how you guys do.
The 10% myth is one of the most common misconceptions about the brain. It is true that not every neuron is active at every moment in time. For some activities, we use 10% or even less of our brain's neurons. However, throughout the day and across all the activities we must do, we will use all of our brain's neurons. We do use 100% of our brains. So why are only a certain number of neurons active at any given moment? Information in the brain is represented by the patterns of neuronal activity, or in other words, the combinations of which neurons are active or inactive. If all the neurons were active together, there would be no pattern, there would be no information in the brain, and this would be a very bad thing. In short, if we did use all of our brain at the same time, and if all of our neurons were active together, then our brains would not be able to do anything interesting. Well, even if we don't have 90% of our brains unused and available for us to take control over, this doesn't mean that we cannot increase our cognitive skills. By applying certain strategies in the way we think, and even training for specific problems, we can allow us to become more mentally agile.